Welcome everyone to our part one tips, tricks, and tools webinar for Sage 300. My name is Stephen Phelps, and I'm the marketing manager here at Acumen. And today we have Nick Nabosny to show you how you can maximize your skills with your ERP investment. Please be aware that this webinar is in listen-only mode and should last around 1 hour long. Throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, please use the chat option and we'll answer them near the end of the session. We'll go ahead and get started. So I will now pass it on to Nick.
Thanks very much, Stephen, and thank you everyone for attending this afternoon. As Stephen mentioned, we're going to go through some tips and tricks in Sage 300. This is really one of my favorite presentations to give because it's hopefully every single person on the call today walks away with something that can make their life better using Sage 300. So let's kind of jump right in. And our goals today are to, as I said, review some of the tips that can help with data entry, save some time, make data entry better, faster, and more efficient. Review some of the, I'll call them tricks that we've learned that, over the 20 some years of consulting on Sage 200, we've picked up working with clients all over, and kind of share them with all of you on the call here. And hopefully, as I said, you take some of these home and makes things better for you. And then lastly, we're going to spend a few minutes on some looking at some tools that the Acumen team has developed that can increase efficiency with your data entry, with imports, with getting data, into the system with Sage 300. So I'm going to be jumping back and forth between PowerPoint and Sage 300. So we'll kind of look at it on the slide and then jump over to Sage 300 and take a look there, and I'll walk you through it. So we're recording this, and we'll put a link to this out on our YouTube channel. And also, feel free to reach out to your account manager if you'd like a copy of any of these slides. So let's go ahead and dig into the detail here. So the first thing is multi-company functionality. Now, this has been around in Sage 300 for a number of years, but and we certainly helped some clients take advantage of this, but we think there's definitely a few more that could really benefit from this. And so, a couple of things here. You can customize the drop-down list by user, and then you can also change the colors of companies so that you can quickly identify what company you're in. So let's take a look at what I mean by that. Let's jump over to Sage here. So everyone's probably familiar with the login of the company, right? So you put your name and your password in here. Well, you can see that I cannot select one of the companies from the dropdown until I put my password in, and then I can see that I actually have access to both of the sample companies in my data set here. Now, if I try a different user, I only have access to one of those companies because I've gone in and turned on a setting that allows me to block access to other companies. So that's a neat little thing to help users. We have lots of clients that have many different companies set up, and you can really limit that list to users that have access to certain things. The way we do that is actually to modify the A4W INI file, which is in your runtime folder. Now, I'm getting a little bit technical, but it is something that's installed out on your server, and you can flip a setting in there to allow that to turn on, and then anyone with access to that company can see it in the drop-down list. So if I don't have any security to one of the entities, I would not see it in my drop-down. So pretty powerful little feature that can be added to turn that on. And for any of these tips and tricks, if you have any questions on how to do it, feel free to just shoot over a support case or reach out to your account manager, and they can point you in the right direction. Now, when I log into companies, we don't see enough of this either, but a lot of people know that you can launch more than one company at a time, right? And if I do that, sometimes it can be confusing. Am I in Sample Company Inc. or Sample Company Limited? Well, if you go into database setup, and the admin user has to do this for you, it can be your admin user, right? Because I need to know the admin password, but I can go in and actually change colors of a particular database. So A lot of times we'll make test databases in red so you can clearly see that, but you may also want to see, different entities, so Sample Company Inc. is in blue here and Sample Company Limited is in gray. Had to use the Acumen colors, but you can see that, very clearly they're identified. And then all of the other screens that you use will follow suit. So the blue GL batch list here is for Sample Company Inc. And it also has the 6-character database identifier on the top left here. So two little things just to kind of get you more comfortable, especially if I'm launching more than one company at the same time. If I do that, keep in mind I'm only using one license, right? So we have those land packs. And if I launch both of the companies, I'm still only using one license. And if I log into 6 or 8 different companies, I'm not kind of taking up my 10 user land pack there. It's still one user logged into the system as long as I'm on the same machine. Okay, let's go back to PowerPoint. Now we're going to get into some data entry shortcuts. How do I get through the data entry faster? How do I make it easier to put data in, to kind of interact with the system without touching the mouse? Now, a lot of us, I'm probably aging myself here, but a lot of us have worked with the Sage 300 system for years and years, back when it was called ACPAC Plus in the DOS days when we didn't have a mouse. So, a lot of these, we kind of searched for these to make it a lot faster. So a couple things, I can use the Alt key plus an underlined letter as a hotkey to navigate around a screen. I can use the plus key in numeric fields. Of course, you're probably familiar with tabbing to move through the fields, but a shift tab will move you backwards through the fields. And then a control tab will help you scroll through some of the tabs. Let's take a look at how that works. We'll go back into Sage 300 here, and let's take a look at, say, AP invoice batch list. And if I do Alt, and sometimes it's a little bit tough to see on webinars, but it turns on an underline for all of the different hotkey letters. So Alt F to go to the file menu, Alt O to open a new one, Alt N to go, to open a batch, Alt N for a new batch, Alt D to delete a batch, T to post a batch, P to print a batch. So if I do that, if I want to open this particular batch here, I can do Alt O and start to tab through the screens. And Alt C to close that one. Maybe that wasn't the one I wanted, and I can tab through and do Alt N to open a new one and start to work through that screen. As I'm doing tab, I can move through the fields, of course, and Shift tab will take me backwards through that same tab sequence that we just went through. And then Control tab will actually move me through the tabs on the screen here. So if I wanted to, I could always come over and click on terms or optional fields or check the totals. Well, if I do Control tab, I can scroll through those. Again, just a small thing, but the less I touch the mouse and the more I can do it with keystrokes, the faster I can be with data entry. So just a couple of automated, hotkeys and ways to move through the screen and kind of ways to go backwards through the screen as you're working with something. Next would be a few more shortcuts to, kind of pull up help, to, refresh a screen, to turn on or off something with the space bar, or to zoom into one particular line or one particular row. And then also, copying data when you're entering new information, like an item, like a vendor, or like a customer. So let's take a look at how those would work. So one of the places I like to use the space bar the most, think of the space bar as a way to toggle things on or off. And I really like to use it in the reconciliation screen here. So if I pull up a particular bank rec and I go over to the reconciliation tab, let's just maximize this so we can see everything. There's the reconciliation column where I can double click and manually turn things on and off, right? But this is an on and off. This works for checkboxes. This works for yes, no when I'm picking invoices to pay. but I can use the space bar and the arrow key to very quickly move through the system and select things, much faster than double clicking and again, using the mouse to move through things. Now, if I wanted to, if I wasn't sure about a particular field or a particular value, um, F1, let's go through all the F keys, the function keys to get some help here. Sage has consistently been adding to the help files as every new release comes out. They're doing better and better and adding more and more information to the help screen. So I'm sure lots of you on the call today probably hit F1, at least sometime in the past to open something up, to read about it. So whatever screen I'm on, as soon as I hit F1, it's going to take me to help uh, about that particular screen because it is context sensitive. Now, the one thing I really wanted to point out here was, this is a nice little blurb about everything that goes on in the bank rec screen. But in almost every screen, you're going to see a drop down called fields and controls. And this is where it will actually talk about every single field on every single tab of the screen you're working with. AP invoice entry, a vendor screen, bank rec screen, as you see here, and we'll tell you a little bit about each of the fields, each of the buttons, each of the functions, and what they're used for, and even some suggested, this account should typically be a liability account because it's used to do this, and we recommend doing this. So they've done a nice job of adding that into the context-sensitive help, and that again can be launched with the F1 key from any screen to pull up information about that particular value. Now, when we want to launch a finder, right? Let's go into our vendors here, and perhaps we're looking for a vendor. I can always click on the magnifying glass and you'll see that everywhere. But the F5 key will launch the finder for me as well. And I can, pull up the finder very quickly, navigate to what I'm looking for. Now, if I know that it's account, vendor 5,000 or something like that, it starts with 50. If I type in 50 and hit F5, it's going to take me right to that spot in the finder. And then I can quickly navigate and select the one I'm working with. Okay. Now, ways to refresh the screen, right? So if I wanted to pull up, we're going to do a payment entry here. So let's go in, let's do Alt-N to start a new payment batch here, and we'll do webinar batch. And we're going to do a payment for a particular vendor. So I'm tabbing through and I want to click the go button, right? You've probably heard us say you got to click the arrows or the little icon, the little blue arrow here. F7 will actually do that same thing. Click on the go button and refresh the screen for me. And then I can actually use my spacebar again to toggle yes or no on. So again, kind of moving through it a little bit faster than again, grabbing the mouse as I tab through those particular fields. While we're here, you can certainly rearrange and customize every one of the data entry screens or data entry grids to your liking, right? So if I don't really care to see if this is the first payment number, I can hide that. We don't really do discounts on the AP side, so I'll hide that. Maybe I want this a little bit wider. Maybe I want net balance to be over here, so I'll click and drag that. And as I make changes, any of these changes that we're talking about and doing here in the system are for my user. So if I log in on Steven's machine as Nick, it's going to look the way I left it, not the way Steven left it. So it's all stored by the user login and not the actual computer that you're working with. Okay, next is a way to kind of zoom in to a particular row or a particular line. And I like to use this a lot in purchase orders or even order entry as I'm kind of going through a data entry screen that might have a long scroll bar, right? Where I need to see lots of different bits of information. Well, I certainly can scroll through it. I can maximize my screen. I can hide things or shrink up things or change the order of things, but I can also hit F9, function 9, to open up the zoom window. And what happens is it opens up a little screen that shows me all of the fields on row 1. So if I needed to go to row 2 and add another line, you can see in the background, I can still do the same data entry here, but I now can work with it, and see everything. So if I need to see if there was a partial shipment, if I need to see what the unit price was, or what available quantities we have on hand in this location or another location. So whenever you see a big long scroll bar in a data entry screen like that, the F9 key is a great tool to kind of open that up and see everything. So may not be something you do every time, and certainly kind of rearranging the screen is faster, but sometimes it's really helpful to see everything about that particular row. So F9 will allow you to do that and launch that zoom key or zoom window into that particular item. Now, lastly is a way to kind of copy data. So let's say we need to add a new inventory item, or we need to add a new general ledger account, right? Well, as you know, you've probably all added something to Sage in the past, right? Well, everything is keyed or based on the kind of unique field, or we call it the indexed field. So the account number has to be unique, right? I can't save another account 1000 for petty cash. So I don't have an account 1001 though. And let's say we're going to set up a new petty cash, or we're going to set up a new cash account, but I want it to have all of the same settings here that I have for petty cash. So what I like to do, instead of just clicking new and starting from scratch from a blank screen, I'll bring up, the same, the account that I kind of want to copy, quote unquote, or the vendor or the inventory item, whatever that static data is that I want to copy, and then just change the value. So I change the index field to be 1001. And I'm going to say this is going to be the GM checkbook or something like that, And what happens is everything that had come through for me stays there. So all of my structured code, my normal balance, my settings, whether or not it's a control account, if I had anything else turned on, would still be there. I can override anything, but it's just defaulting it for me. And then I can click add. And so it's a lot faster because I can change the index field, perhaps the description or name, and then just add that particular value to the system. So it's a lot faster than kind of clicking plus new every time and copying that over. So we've seen clients, we get calls, say, hey, I got to add a bunch of new asset accounts. We've added a new division, or I have a bunch of revenue accounts for a new product, or I want to add a bunch of items quickly. Of course, there's always imports. There's always Acumen Tools to do that. But you have a couple and you need to do it fast. It's always better to copy what you can when you can do it. Okay, next is user interface customization, or you probably have seen it or heard us talk about UI customization. So what this allows us to do is hide fields on the screen, or even hide buttons, such as maybe a delete key to provide an extra layer of security. Security is very good in Sage 300. It's very granular, but using this UI tool, customization tool, excuse me, you can actually get down to the field level for security if you want to. So let's jump over and see how that would work. So one of my favorite ways to show this is an actual real life example. We had a client that wanted to start all of their vendors on hold, and then they would make sure they had all of the information collected, the certificate of insurance, the W-9, perhaps a contract signed, whatever it was. They wanted to make sure they had all of that gathered together before they allowed any payments to go out of the system. So what we did is we said, okay, we have a little script that starts everything on hold. So when we create a new vendor, it would start on hold. And then we went file, customize. So no coding here. You can all do this. This is built into the core of the system. And it brings up the screen customization here, or the UI customization tool. You have to have what's called a working profile. So this allows me to assign it to certain users, right? So, I might create a payables one, I might create an admin one, a clerk one. There's no wrong answer to what you call that working profile. but we have to have a name for it or names for them if you have more than one, so I can assign them. And then what you see here are all of the different buttons, fields, and tabs that are on the screen behind it, which is the AP vendor screen. And I can see if I scroll down and look for the on hold button, you can see I'd already turned it off, but what I can do is I can toggle that field on or off. And so if I leave it off and then I assign it to other users in the system, uh, those users would not even see that field. So thus they would not be able to turn it off, even if they had full access rights to add, modify, and delete vendors. So it's a way to further enhance security for certain pieces of information. We've even had clients, like I said in the PowerPoint there, or I showed in the PowerPoint, take off the delete button. We really trust Steven. We want him to do all of the vendor maintenance, but we don't want him to ever delete one. So we can actually take the delete button right off the screen. Sorry, Steven, we trust you, but just not that much. So we see this used to kind of take fields off of screens to speed up data entry. Remember, as we're tabbing through the screens, if the field is not there, it's going to skip it. So less tabs, faster data entry. And then often to take fields off like this to kind of further enhance security. So that's called UI customization or user interface customization. And I can do that right from whatever screen I'm in. And then under admin services is where I can actually assign UI profiles. So I can pick user Nick and assign Nick to that profile. So when I log in as Nick now, I would see the AP vendor screen with the hidden button, the hidden delete button, and the hidden on hold checkbox. So 2 steps, I go in and turn on and off the fields I want, and then I can assign UI profiles to whichever user or users that I'd like to assume those changes when they log in the next time. Okay, next is scheduling. This is something that has been in the system forever and ever, and we don't see it used enough, in my opinion. So you can create schedules, right? Anyone that's on the call that's done recurring transactions, you know that everything is assigned to a schedule. But what I really want to focus on here is the reminder aspect to it. So you can have the system, kind of pop up and tell you it's time to process your recurring entry journal. It's time to process your recurring payables or your recurring receivables. So let's take a look. If we go into common services, we can create schedules under the scheduling section here, or I can actually do it as I'm processing a transaction. So we'll just take a look at it here in the scheduling center and go into schedules for a moment. I can create any number of schedules that I want. So if I have a monthly schedule here, I can pick the recurring period, and it's got just about every combination of time, other than phases of the moon, I always joke. But I can go in and set this up to be every 1 month, every 3rd month, on the 1st day of every month, on the 2nd Tuesday of every month. So lots of flexibility there. But what we see skipped quite a bit is perhaps I want to create monthly Nick or something like this, because it's going to remind Nick to do this particular transaction. And I might have monthly Steven and monthly Jen and monthly Max and monthly Angie and set all of those up, because I can come in here and say, I want this to remind Nick 2 days in advance of whatever the schedule start date is. And then what happens is when I log in as Nick, it's going to pop up a reminder and say that this particular schedule is due. I don't have to do anything else. I just log in, and because it's scheduled that trigger, because it's 2 days in advance, I can click on the schedule and click the process button and generate a whole bunch of recurring payables or recurring journal entries or recurring receivables, whatever I have attached to that particular schedule. So again, saves me from coming over to accounts payable, going into periodic processing, creating the recurring payables batch, picking the one I want, clicking process, and sending it over. It pops up, tells me it's time to create it. I click process, and I'm finished. It does it for me. Okay, next is a way to create multiple copies of the same icon. So launch the same screen twice. This can be really helpful for those of us that are working all day long and happen to have a phone on our desk that rings all the time with people asking questions. You can never get that one order process that you started at 8 o'clock this morning, right? Because you're looking up other things. So what I mean by this is, let's say I'm working on, let's do an order or a purchase order or any transaction screen, right? And I'm in the process of going through, putting in this order, and I'm adding lines to it, and I'm kind of 50 lines in, and the phone rings, and I need to look up the status of another order, right? Well, I can go ahead and minimize this, and I can launch order entry again, but it's going to bring me back to that same screen, right? That's the way the system works by default. It just opens up whatever I have minimized. So let's post this. I won't print the order confirmation, and we're working on order number 70 here, right? So most of the screens in Sage 300, if you right click on them and you go to properties, we've all looked at, customizing the name of these, start here, Nick, this is where you process a new order. So we've seen that a lot of clients have adopted that, which is great. But this one here, start multiple copies, is what we're talking about in this particular case. So I click on that and I say, okay. And now I go back into order entry, and I'm going to work on order number 70. And we're getting our next line in here, our next product. The customer says they really want one of these, and I'm copying this from a sheet and working through it. Again, the phone rings and someone wants to know what's going on with order number 68. I minimize this, and this time when I pull that up, I get a new instance of the same screen. So I still have the other one down here on the bottom. And in fact, I can bring them both up, and maybe I'm copying an order. I want to see what's on another order and enter the same thing in here. Or I want to see if we did the same data entry, on order number 68. I can pull it up, take a look at it. We'll go down to the end here and pull up number 68. Oops, no, that wasn't a copy, but I can see what's going on. Mr. Ronald Black bought different things on order number 70. So I can launch as many different copies of the same icon by turning on that setting. You can always turn it off if you don't want it to work that way any longer, but it's nice. We see that for order entry, for purchase orders. We see it for AR customer inquiry a lot, or vendor inquiry screen, so that you can maybe look up more than one customer, and you're doing some research about something that's been paid, and then another customer calls and you want to answer their question. So you launch a new instance of that and kind of don't lose where you are on the other customer inquiry. Okay, let's jump back to PowerPoint here. Customizing the desktop. So in Sage 300, for a long time, you've been able to, make it look the way you want it to look. You can create custom shortcuts. We see lots of these when we do upgrades, right? And we help you test these and make sure that they flow through to the upgrades. But you can add shortcuts to other icons. You can add shortcuts to other programs or macros or reports, even to web pages. So if you wanted a link to your company intranet, or to maybe oanda.com for a currency lookup, custom folders. There's one where you can put in a startup folder. So I'll show you that. If I name it startup, every time I log into the company, it's going to launch anything in that folder, which is pretty neat. And then I can rename icons. I can change backgrounds of the actual screen. So let's take a look and jump over to Sage. So I created a Nick folder here. And so what I did is I went to the very top, and I right click in the white space, and I select new. And first I'm going to put a new folder in. Now the system alphabetizes everything for me. So I did .Nick. So it dropped it up to it kind of popped it all the way up to the top here. So it was alphabetical at the top, but you certainly don't have to do that. And then when I come in my Nick folder, Now I can add folders for custom shortcuts, custom Sage reports, whatever I want to do here. Now, keep in mind and notice that there's a button for all users. If I turn this on, it truly means for every user that's in my Sage environment. Now, if I turn that on, it worked great. It turns that on for everyone. But if one of those users happens to delete that shortcut or delete that icon, it also deletes it for all users. So I know our support team gets some calls on occasion. Hey, my something disappeared and I know I didn't do it. Well, if it's all users, there's a good chance someone else didn't know what it was or took it off their menu and it came off yours as well because it's set up for all users. Now, if I do custom Sage reports, and then in here, maybe I want to, access to a new, custom AR aging report, and I can browse out to the report file and have a custom shortcut here. So this works with reports. This works with macros. I made a shortcut here to one of our Acumen tools. So for those of you on the call, and we're going to look at these a little bit later, but those of you on the call that have used Acumen tools, I can, browse out to the actual Excel file, give it a name, and I can launch Excel right from this Sage 300 desktop. So we've seen people launch Outlook. We've seen people launch custom web pages, as we said, custom macros, other applications. So anything that has an executable file or a macro file or a report file can be set up right here on your Sage desktop. And then one of the things we like to do sometimes is if I have rights to modify my desktop, we can modify or set up a desktop look and feel that you want to kind of be the preferred way. And if you have a lot of users, let's say you have order entry, team, a customer service team doing order entry, and you want everyone's to be the same, behind the scenes, we could copy that look and feel for all of them. And then if I go in and right click and go to properties, I can change the name or the title of any icon. Excuse me. Yeah. And then I can also change the icon if I want it to look a little bit different so that it kind of stands out. And there's lots of different icons to choose from. And then lastly, we've done this before for some users that, we maybe want to have access to one or two things. So we add those buttons for them. We drag this bar over and turn off their ability to modify their desktop, and they're left with a nice clean screen of maybe one or two different icons, shipment out the door, or maybe I'm looking up customer confirmations or something like that, and that's all I need to see. I don't need to drill around or look at any other bits of information. Visual process flows is a continuance on the discussion of modifying the desktop or customizing the end user experience. I'll say this is relatively new, but it's been around for several versions. If you don't see it, shoot us a support ticket and we can help you turn it on because you need to have security to see it. But they are a kind of flattened out look and feel to a particular module or set of modules. And what I mean by that is under accounts payable, right? I have transactions set up, reports, vendors, right? Well, if I look at the AP visual process flow, this is another time where we might make the screen look like this for someone who just does payables and kind of lock it down. So these are all links, of course. So I can go into enter vendor invoices and it's going to take me to the invoice entry screen. I can further, I could give a user all rights to run reports in AP and then limit which of the reports I want them to see just by controlling which reports are available in their visual process flow. We've done trainings on this to help clients get comfortable modifying these because I can right click on one and go to edit and it takes me into the editor where I can put in images, I can change things around, I can edit buttons, I can add text, I can add links to other programs. So just like I can do macros and other programs and reports on my classic desktop, I can do the same thing with visual process flows and have icons to Acumen Tools, to outside systems, to other reports or macros that are going to be used every day. Again, keeping the user inside of Sage 300 so they're not kind of jumping around system to system, and again, saving little bits of time here and there, which can all add up throughout the day. Next are my Finder options. So if we take a look at Finder options, a lot of people use the Finder every day. And we talked about launching that with the F5 key, but there's a few different neat things you can do in the Finders. And we've gotten questions saying, I don't see the field that I expect to see or that I want to see in a particular Finder. So if again, let's look for a vendor, right? So we'll go in here, we'll hit our F5 key, and we'll open up the vendor screen. You can see there's lots of fields available to me here to search for a vendor by, and every one of them that's showing is going to be in my drop down here. Now, a couple of things. If I want to add some more columns, I can go to settings and columns here. And every single piece of information that's stored about a vendor, including optional fields, is available for me to include. I can turn on 50 at a time. So if you're at 50, you might have to move some things off. And if there are some things you don't care about, you can move them out of your Finder and you can include other things in to take a look at. And remember, you're doing this. If you make this change, this is only for your login. You're not affecting anyone else using Sage 300 at your organization. I could also go in and set up colors. So if I wanted the vendor number color to have a yellow background so that it's really visible to me, I can do that. And so it pops out if I want to. And then lastly, I can change the key. This is not as common. We don't see this used that often, but if you have, you want it indexed by the short name or you want it indexed by the group code. So there's certain group codes that you work with all the time. Maybe you want to set that up and change the key so that it sorts differently. And when I do that, it's just going to go in a different order and make it faster for me. That's really only applicable when there's huge volumes of data, but it is there and it works very well if that's ever an issue for you. Now in the Finder here, I can, just like we talked about the data entry grids, I can move things around. I can turn things on and off in the settings columns. I can right click and hide things in here, but I can also go to set criteria where I could say, perhaps I only want to look at vendors, that are in the group code inventory, because that's the only vendors I work with. I don't work with the services vendors at all. So I'm going to go to set criteria. I'm going to look for the group code column here, and I'm going to add that to my criteria. And then it wants to know, okay, what do I want that to be? Should it be greater than or equal to something, less than or equal to something, not like something, or like something? But I want it to be equal to INV, because those are the ones that I work with. If I just say, okay, it's going to do it one time and filter this for me. And I always forget this, so I always want to make sure I click save so that it happens every time I launch this particular Finder screen. And you can see that it's now hidden all of the services for me. And I still have the ability to do my search. So it's a way to do kind of a multi-level search in the particular Finders. Again, setting this up just for you, not for any other user in your system. Printing reports. I would assume everyone on the call has probably printed something, right, from Sage 300. The whole idea is to get some good information out of the system. Well, you may not have seen some of the tools or functions to kind of see the information or save the information with filters, and so that I can run reports a lot faster. So saving filters, we're going to talk about faster exports to Excel, maybe a different way to export to Excel, and then also a way to change the print destination in the system. So let's take a look at a particular report, right? One of the ones we probably use a lot is the accounts payable, aged payables report. Now, I come in and run this all the time. I like to turn off adjustments. Perhaps I only want to run this for my vendor group, right? INV to INV. Well, I can do this and click print, and it's going to run the report. I'll get the output that I want, and I can close it. And next time I come back in, it's back to the way I left it, right? Everything's back to normal, turned on again. Well, if I want to, I can do some of those settings again. And this time I'm going to go to settings at the top of the report screen and save those settings as defaults. And now I'm going to print my report and get the results that I'd like or that I expect. And I'm finished. I'm happy working with it, and I'll close it. But now when I go back in, I see that my settings have been saved, so I can run this the way I want each time. If I've messed something up, or I want to clear those, I can very easily clear the save settings, and I'm back to normal. So there's no harm to be done here. And then one other thing we've seen people do is I like to make a copy. So I'll right click on age payables. I'll make a copy and right click and paste this. Now I could put this in my folder if I wanted it there. I'll paste it right here. And if I right click and go to properties, so now we're combining some of our tips and tricks, and I'm going to put, this is age payables for the INV group. Now I'm going to leave this one with the default settings and this one with the INV group. So I'm going to go back to my group code, and I'm going to say INV to INV and turn off my adjustments and save my settings there. So in effect, I've made myself a custom report, just by copying an icon and saving some of the settings. Now that's not as powerful as Sage Intelligence or using Crystal Reports, of course, but it's a neat way to kind of get what I want and save it. So the next time I run it, I don't have to change those settings. Okay. Now, exporting to Excel, right? So all of the reports can be exported to Excel. So if I like to print to preview first, and then up here, I can print that out, of course, or I can go here and export this to Excel. I can export to PDF, CSV. So talking about specifically Excel, if I select the Excel one that doesn't say data only, either of those options, what happens is it's going to export all of the headers, the headings, the footers, the page numbers, the titles. I'm going to get all of that information, which is fine if I'm, looking for a pretty report, or I'm going to print it out, or I want to go in and delete all that. But if I select data only, what's going to happen is it's going to strip all of that off for me. So I'm only going to get the rows that I have in the data that I might want to work with. So it's a little bit more designed. Again, this is not Sage Intelligence where everything is already in Excel, but this is a better way to get information into Excel from some of the canned reports. And rather than do disk file where I'm going to browse to somewhere and export the file, I like to do application and say okay and okay, and it's going to dump the data out. It's going to launch Excel for me and give me only the data, none of the headers. Sorry, I didn't want to make it that large. All of the headers for me. So now I lost the top, the headings, the page numbers, the footers, and all of that. So it's a little bit nicer to work with, and everything's in its individual cells. Okay. Now, lastly is changing the print destination. And this is probably for people a little bit newer to Sage 300, but down on the bottom right here, you'll see a little icon. You can also get to the same thing up at the top under the file menu here where print destination is. Same exact way. I can double click it down here or launch it from there, but I can print directly to a file. So if I know I want to export this, or if I know I want to email this report out, I can set the print destination in advance and say, okay. And then when I go to run a particular report, it's going to launch an email and allow me to type that in and print it and attach it to an email for me. So again, a faster way. I can always export it, run it, run it, export it, and then attach it to an email. But I can do that in one step by managing my print destination. Next is Notes. Notes is a tool that's been added in the recent years for customers, vendors, and inventory items. It's part of the core application. If I go in and say, again, work with one of our favorite vendors here, I pull open the vendor screen and we pull up a particular vendor, and I can see the notes automatically pop up. This is our primary vendor for new products. If I have notes that kind of disappear or are active on specific dates. So if you want to get communication to your customer service team about a customer, about a particular inventory item, always charge 10% more on this item, or whatever the case might be, I can put notes in for specific items, customers, or vendors that can be seen by users whenever they're kind of interacting with those particular static records. Global search is again a newer feature in Sage 300. It was released a few years ago, and it's been kind of enhanced a bit and growing a little bit. And what it allows you to do is search for master records across the system. So I can go up to the top of Sage 300. I can look for something that contains sales or a particular vendor name. And it will search through all the transactions, all the static records, and bring back those results for me with drill downs so I can click on them. Now, if you enter multiple words, by default, it's going to do any or. So it's going to say, okay, does it include this, or any of the records you've typed in? You can refine this by adding quotes or a plus sign. So it says, okay, I want something that says 1200, the vendor number, and has a description of such and such. So let's take a look. Global search can be found at the very top of your Sage 300 screen. And I can go in, as I said, and maybe I'm looking for something that includes 1200 here. Well, I can see I want to search for transactions, and it's got every single module turned on. I can turn things off. So if I want it to be faster, or I know I'm not looking for AP or AR, I only want, just AP, and I can type in 1200 and say enter. And it's going to search pretty quickly through everything for you and return that back. And then the blue section here is the hyperlink where I can drill back to that individual transaction. So if I had something like Orchid document management link, some of the third-party applications turned on, that will allow me to drill into something, and then perhaps the document would show up here so I can get to it pretty quickly. So it can be combined with some of the other tools out there, some of the other third-party applications, which is pretty neat. Lastly, I want to spend a few minutes talking about, as I said, Acumen Tools. And Acumen Tools are a suite of import or automation tools, and that allow you to do data entry faster, allow you to run reports faster, allow you to run reports and calculate some accruals and bring entries into the system faster. Whenever we're using the system, data entry is not our goal. Getting information out of the system is our goal. So let's take a look at this. Our development team has spent years kind of helping clients with Sage 300. And as such, we've then spent a lot of time kind of knowing what it does really well and what it doesn't do very well. And importing is okay, but it's clunky, right? Well, we've created a series of tools that will make this easier for you. So I just have a few examples. We have about 50 different tools in the library right now, crossing a whole bunch of different modules. So I'm just going to show a few examples and how we might use something like this. So this is a tool for the GL transaction listing to enter journal entries into the system. You might see some familiar fields here where, do you want this to be an auto reversing entry? Yes or no. I'm going to do a December payroll accrual. So I want it to auto reverse. Do I want it to be posted or not? If I say no, it's going to be sitting there in the system, and I can review it once it gets to Sage, and I can post it. Well, the beauty of this is Excel. It has an import button. It has finders, so I can launch finders for accounts, for the database. All of these tools can cross different companies in our system. So here's 2 lines for Sample Company Inc., 2 lines for Sample Company Limited, but it's Excel, right? So I can do something like this. I might need to calculate my accrual. So I have all my employees listed out, what their annual salary is. I've calculated what the weekly salary is, what their daily salary is. And maybe in December, we don't have 7 days. It falls to 5 days that I need to accrue because that's the way our pay period happens to fall in the calendar for this particular year or this month. So I changed that, right? And Excel did its magic and calculated that for me. And then over here, all of my numbers updated automatically. And if I wanted to, if I added some new employees, I can copy this down. So now you see Ringo Starr has pulled through and Stu Sutcliffe has pulled through. And so I'm not doing any data entry. I just have formulas in here that are pulling from the tab to make sure all that information is updated for me. And then when I'm ready, I can import and push that journal entry over to Sage 300. It's going to do validation for me, make sure that the company's valid. It's an unlocked period, it's an active account. Same thing that would happen if I keyed the entry in, but it would allow me to do that much, much faster. Next is a quick bank transaction. I can go and enter bank transactions crossing multiple companies. Maybe we're recording the car leases for the owners and we want to do that in 2 different companies. And I want to not have to log in and out of 2 different Sage environments or 10. We have clients with hundreds of companies and they can do this all from a single screen, entering this in and then importing it, pushing it up to the system. Here's another bank entry where we're recording a due to due from cleanup where I wanted to go into a particular bank code in Sample Company Inc. and then out of a different bank code in Sample Company Limited. So I have a negative and a positive here, which is going to do the correct deposit or withdrawal entry into each of the different organizations. So I'm doing a bit of intercompany transactions here, again, in one screen outside the system and pushing a button and making that entry without having to log in and out of multiple different companies. AP transactions, if I wanted to record miscellaneous payments, maybe we have a paper checkbook. One of our clients, we have lots of clients in the hospitality industry, and they might have a checkbook at the front desk that the GM can sign off on. And perhaps, we get the stubs at the end of the month and we need to record all of those and what happened. Well, I can record those here and what happens in each of the different companies. You can see this one has a little bit of a red triangle here, and that shows me that there was an invalid vendor when I click the import button. So it's doing that validation for me so I know what's happening to this, this vendor and nothing's been imported. So I can correct that and then work through it again. And lastly, here's one for purchasing. So if we use purchasing, a lot, we certainly can have, many purchase orders in the system. And if we're managing it correctly, we may be using expected arrival dates, right? Well, what if I want to, update those? I could go to each of the POs, go to every single line, right, and update those dates manually if I wanted to. Well, this tool, if I retrieve the data in, it's going to pull all of the open POs into my system here. I can put in one vendor or all vendors if I want to. I, of course, have my finders and stuff that I can look things up, but it's going to bring everything in for me with the expected arrival date that I had here. I can use Excel and update these. So if I want to, copy these down and then update this, it's going to push it back into the system. And you can see the updated ones show up in red. So I see that that's a new value that I'm going to update the system, update the purchase order system here. And then of course it's Excel, right? So I could filter. So if I only want to work with PO11, I can just bring in this, or I only want to work, I'm worried about a delay on the mini fluorescent light bulbs. So I can bring back all of my POs and filter on just a particular product or just a particular item and work with that. Okay. So a very quick way to go through that and quickly update information. So there's lots of tools in the environment that allow us to speed things up like that. Okay, let's open it up for some questions. We have about 5 or 10 minutes left. And Stephen, did any questions come in? Please feel free to use the chat window because all the lines are muted, but we'll certainly read them out loud and make sure everything gets answered for you that we can answer. If we run out of time, we'll certainly take all the questions and make sure we email out answers to all of the attendees.
Thanks, Nick. So yes, we'll open up the chat option. We did have a few questions that came in during the presentation, so we can actually go ahead and get started. One of the questions that came in said, do you offer custom training courses?
We do actually, yes. We offer custom training courses for different groups of modules, the financial suite, the distribution suite with order entry for Sage Intelligence to running reports. So feel free to reach out to your account manager, and I'll put our contact information up here. You can reach out directly to them or at am@acumenfl.com, and we certainly can get you some information about training sessions. We also offer managed service plans where training can be included in there if that's something you'd like. If there's new staff that needs to get up to speed, we certainly can help.
Thanks, Nick. Another one that came in was, are you able to copy a journal entry batch?
Yes, actually, that's a good question, and that's another little buried feature. And this is probably a preview for session 2 of tips and tricks because we didn't really get into any of the transactional entries. But let's look for a batch that is posted here that has more than one entry in it. So here's one that has 16 entries in it and a status of posted. So if I open this up, you're going to see that there's a reverse button. So I can reverse this, and I can either reverse just entry number 1 or entry number 2, but I can reverse the entire batch. And I can say I want it to have a description of the original, or perhaps the original with a particular prefix, and then process that. In a new batch here. And we'll click process, and we'll reverse the whole batch. Now, the question was to copy a batch, right? So I don't really want a reversal, but if I go then and post the reversal, I can reverse that. And then I have an unposted batch exactly the way I left it before, where I can modify it, make changes, delete 2 entries, whatever I need. So I reverse it to get a reversal batch, then I reverse the reversal, and I end up with a copy of what I had that I can then modify because it's no longer posted. It's an open batch, and I can fix whatever I need to fix. Now the that only works for posted batches, of course, but you can also always do file export and import or use an Acumen tool to kind of get the same result.
Thanks, Nick. Just due to time, we'll do one more question. And another question that came in was, do all versions have visual process flows?
So not all versions, but it has been around for about 5 or 6 years. So certainly, if you've been upgrading, in the last couple of years, you should have it. If you don't see it for some reason, as I said, just shoot a note to your account manager, to our support team at support@acumenfl.com, and we certainly can make sure you get it turned on. There is a security setting in Sage to make sure it's turned on, or you can go to your admin user and make sure you can see it, but it should be there. It's part of the core application, about 5 or 6 years or 5 or 6 of the last versions.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll go ahead and wrap up. So again, if you guys do have any additional questions, please feel free to email us at am@acumenfl.com, or you can give us a call at 407-965-2411. We do plan to have a part 2 tips and tricks in the future, so be on the lookout for dates and details. Make sure to check out our LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter pages, as long as our YouTube channel, and make sure to subscribe. That's all we have for today. So thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon.